I used to be a dog lover. I love all animals, but dogs have always held a special place in my heart. They're smart and goofy, they're loyal, and they're lovable. I don't dislike cats, but they're so aloof. They typically don't give two shits about humans, but dogs are different. Through thousands of years of domestication, the lives of dogs have become inextricably linked with that of humans. They see us as members of their family. They love and protect us, and look to us for guidance in almost everything they do. It's because of this fact that I volunteer my time and home to the various animal shelters in the area, fostering dogs to help alleviate the cost from shelters which have limited space, but also to help rehabilitate dogs that have been abused, and to help them learn basic obedience, all to improve their chances of being adopted out to their forever home. That's how it happened. I was fostering a golden lab named Polly that was rescued from a puppy mill. When she came to me, she was skittish and fearful of just about everything, having spent most of her life in a small kennel with minimal human interaction. She'd been making speedy progress. The playful and loving animal was finally coming out of her shell, when one night, a little over a week ago, I let her outside into my backyard one final time before bed. I went back inside to brush my teeth and get ready for bed myself when I heard a terrible screeching racket coming from outside. It sounded like an animal being attacked, and I dropped my toothbrush to run outside, fearing the worst. When I got outside, I couldn't see Polly at first. It was dark, and my eyes hadn't adjusted to the night yet. "Polly! Here, girl!" I shouted, my stomach twisting into a knot. After a few agonizing moments of silence, Polly stumbled out of the bushes on the far side of the yard. She moved awkwardly at first, her limbs moving shiftily and out of unison, and I thought maybe she had had a seizure or some other neurological problem crop up. And she suddenly shook herself off and ran past me back inside the house. I followed her inside to make sure she was okay, but after a quick inspection, all I could find was a relatively superficial scratch across her abdomen. So I decided just to keep an eye on her and watch out for any further incidents. Polly normally slept in a crate in my kitchen. She felt more secure having a tiny sleeping space, and I could leave the crate open so she could access the doggy door during the night. I normally slept with my bedroom door closed. That night, I awoke with a sense of foreboding. I couldn't pinpoint this sudden feeling of dread until I rolled over and noticed 2 pinpricks of light glowing just off the side of my bed. My heart seized in my chest until I realized it was just Polly, sitting by the side of my bed, with the moonlight reflecting in her eyes. I guess I must have just not latched my bedroom door properly, and she pushed her way in. It had happened before, and in such circumstances, I would usually invite the dog to sleep in my bed, even though this wasn't advisable, because it made it easy to get too attached to a dog you weren't keeping, and you never knew what the dog's future family would want. That's not to encourage bad habits. But for some reason, the way she just sat there, staring at me, was really unnerving. I got up and shooed her out of my room, back to her kennel in the kitchen, and went back to my own room. This time I made sure the door was latched properly, and after a moment's hesitation, I locked the door despite my logical brain telling me that was overkill. The next day, Polly was acting more aloof than she had been recently, and I wondered if her rehabilitation had regressed. But it wasn't quite that. She wasn't acting fearful or aggressive. It was almost as if she suddenly had no personality. She didn't wag her tail or want to play. nor did she put her ears back or run away, or show any typical signs that mean leave me alone. She just maintained a distance from me. If I approached her, she would move away, not letting me touch her. If I moved away, she would follow, keeping me in sight and maintaining a specific distance between us. All the while, she was simply staring, watching me. It was really unnerving, though I told myself I was just being silly. I was trying to put this odd behavior out of my mind, going about my usual routine, when the first incidents happened. I was making myself soup for lunch and was boiling a pot of water on the stove. Polly had been keeping a steady distance from me all day, so it came as a complete surprise when she suddenly jumped up on the counter next to me, knocking the pot from the stove. I jumped away as the pot clattered to the floor, splattering scalding liquid across the kitchen. I slapped at my bare feet and ankles quickly, where the hot water had splashed across my skin, but I'd moved far away enough that I only received a few small superficial burns. I was more worried about Polly, but she simply stared at me, again with those unblinking eyes. She hadn't even balked at the sound of loud noise, or the mess, as most dogs would. We locked stares for a moment, before she moved away again to maintain her distance from me. I chastised myself for forgetting to keep the handle of the pot pointed towards the stove top, as I began to mop up the mess of quickly cooling water. I should have known better, because animals don't. They can't. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that she'd done it on purpose. Her odd behavior continued throughout the day, and my worry was increasing. She wasn't eating, and as far as I could tell, she wasn't going to the bathroom either. She wouldn't let me walk her, but she wouldn't leave my side to visit the backyard on her own either. I lured her out to the backyard, her keeping me in sight, but she wouldn't do her business. I didn't want to stay out in the yard too long, though, because there was an odd, unpleasant smell permeating the area. Whatever. By this point, it was getting late, and I vowed I'd take her to the vet the next day. Getting ready for bed once more, I hesitated and locked the door to my bedroom. Telling myself I wanted to restrict her to the uncarpeted kitchen if she was going to experience a bout of diarrhea or vomiting in the middle of the night. None of that happened, but I don't consider myself lucky. I woke up once more in the middle of the night, and I could feel her eyes on me. That sense of dread returned to me, but I refused to roll over, to justify my fears. It was impossible. The door had been latched properly and locked. I was sure of it. There was absolutely no way Polly could have gotten in. And yet I could feel her eyes boring holes into my back. I didn't sleep another minute that night, despite constantly telling myself that I was just imagining things. When sunlight finally began to filter into my room, the feeling of being watched vanished. Hesitantly and ever so carefully, I rolled over, only to let out a sigh of relief. Polly was not there. I had worked myself up over nothing. Surely I just had a sick dog on my hands. I got up, I got dressed, and I checked my door. Yep. Still locked and latched properly. I opened it, and I froze. Polly was sitting in the hallway, watching me once more. I don't know what I expected after the previous day, but I was once again unsettled. There was something completely unnatural about the way she kept me in her sight every second of the day. However, I was taking her to the vet, so hopefully the problem would soon be solved. I walked outside, her following me at a distance, and I wondered briefly how I could lure her into my car, when I heard a commotion from the sidewalk. Looking over, I saw Miss Morrison, one of my neighbors, struggling to carry a large assortment of groceries and failing. She dropped a couple things and was trying to maintain her precarious grip on the large bag, while simultaneously crouching to retrieve the dropped items. I called out to greet her and jogged over to help her gather the dropped items that had rolled away into the gutter. As I was bent down, reaching for the items, I suddenly felt a strong force impact my back. The wind was knocked out of me, and I went sprawling into the street. My mind froze as I saw a car heading straight towards me, horn blaring. The car swerved at the last second, and I felt it brush the hair on my head as it went by, screeching to a halt. I lay there, frozen, as my mind slowly rebooted itself and I could begin to process the situation. Both the driver of the car and Miss Morrison were asking if I was okay. Still in shock, I nodded, brushing them both off as I looked towards Polly, now sitting where I had been standing on the sidewalk moments earlier. We locked eyes, and this time I could tell. I could see the intelligent understanding in her eyes, and I was freaked. I hurriedly excused myself from Miss Morrison and the driver, once again shakily and probably not too convincingly assuring them that I was okay. I ran back inside, slamming the door and locking it behind me, locking Polly out. I called the shelter and apologetically told them that a family emergency had come up and I could no longer take care of Polly, and that someone had to come retrieve her immediately. I hung up before they could protest, and then turned off all the lights and shut the blinds, pretending not to be home. I froze as the knob on my front door rattled, but it remained locked. Checking the peephole in my front door, I could see Polly just sitting there, staring back directly into my eyes. She knew I was there. She knew I was watching her. I could hardly breathe, and waited what seemed like an eternity until someone from the shelter came to retrieve her. They had a hell of a time getting her into their van, but they were much more equipped to deal with her than I. And frankly, she was no longer my problem. That was about a week ago. I had wanted to call the shelter to apologize or perhaps even warn them about her strange behavior or illness. But I couldn't work up the courage to face the issue. Meanwhile, that strange smell I'd mentioned in my backyard had gotten worse. An overpowering scent of putrefaction, one that sticks to the inside of your nose and mouth with a tinge of sickly sweetness to it. The neighbors were even beginning to complain, insisting that it wasn't coming from their yards. It was then that I found it. Hidden deep in the bushes at the back of my yard was the decomposing corpse of a large animal. Even at this stage of rot, I could clearly tell it was the corpse of a dog. And someone, something, had removed its skin